Shari and Michael are here with me today to talk about our latest installment of our Meditations on the Tarot series. This time we're talking about letter 9, the Hermit. Anyone have any opening remarks?
Hegel.
You want to specify there?
This is as the kids might say, this is Hegelian AF. Isn't it? I mean, he's doing all this with the antinomies, right? It's
right. Yeah,
thesis, antithesis,
yep.
synthesis, right?
Yes.
I mean, he's deep and so many intellectuals of that, the first half of the 20th century, first 3 quarters. Steiner was one of them also. They were so deep into Hegel that it's kind of hard to shake his influence. It's even in Vladimir Soloviev.
Right? Yeah. The whole idea of synthesis, right?
And when I first read this, I didn't know anything about Hegel, right?
Right.
I don't know anything about Hegel
when I was 23.
I thought when I read the first part of this today, I thought, I think I'm just going to sit here quietly and listen.
Well, and I remember I had a tough time the first time I read it because I was trying to penetrate all this technical philosophical language like realism, idealism, right?
Yeah.
It took me a while to get a handle on what that means.
Especially confusing because he uses realism in 2 different senses.
Yes.
To mean 2 different things. So in the first antinomy, he's talking about realism versus idealism, and he's using realism like more in the sense like where a quasi-materialism where the world of objects and things is primary. And then in the second case, he's using it more in like realism in like the scholastic philosophy sense. So
yeah,
that makes it extra confusing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the realism, nominalism thing, that's straight up scholasticism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which you can, of course, I picked up on that quite a bit in the Submerged Reality. The whole first chapter is about that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, but he's trying to penetrate it, and it's interesting that he reading it this time, how to put this, it's easy. Well, I know a lot of Tombergians who take everything he says almost as gospel, right? If this is how it is, and I don't think that way. That this is how it is. This is what he's proposing.
No, he's very clearly
a way
says
to think
too.
about it. Yeah, but Tombergians tend to get, well, they're usually recovering anthroposophists, so they tend to have a super dogmatic strain to them, as much as they say they don't like dogma.
Right.
That often is the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's also what happens with a lot of converts, right?
I think when people that say that, often what they mean is, I don't like other people's dogma.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like, well, but they would never say they're dogmatic in the way they think about things.
Right.
Yet, and that's a challenge. I mean, it
is.
I think because I think we've said before, if you have a dogma, then you can outsource your own responsibility to think about things, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's just the church says. I'm just doing what they tell me, right? Is it true, or whatever you happen to be dogmatic about? Like wokeism, that's a new dogma, right?
Yeah.
If you're not with the game, you get persecuted.
Yeah.
or excommunicated.
Yeah.
Or at least bumped off of YouTube.
That's why it's important to keep that like more like ancient original sense of dogma, which as signposts, that signposts that are pointing the way as opposed to absolutes.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder, because like I'm just thinking back to when I was in the Brethren Church, in the Plymouth Brethren Church, and then they had a lot of dogma that I just hated. Like, I knew it was wrong. I knew in my deepest core, it was wrong. You know, like women can't speak, for example, in the church. And but then you could give your testimony as long as you didn't read out of the Bible, because that was like preaching, right?
Mm.
And so I didn't pretend that it was okay, because I think there's this aspect of, you know, I said to myself, this is not right, but I'm going to put myself under that authority right now because I need to learn that. I need to learn to be under authority. And even when I don't, when I'm wiggling under it, like I really don't like it, right?
Well, because you think you must be doing something wrong, right? There's an insecurity that I think informs that for most people.
Right.
You know, doubt.
Well, I actually
self-doubt.
gave my testimony there once and read a verse first. And boy, did I get in hot water for it, but I knew I would. So
Don't just start quoting scripture at us, honey.
yeah, well, yeah, that's preaching. Right? You can't preach from the pulpit if you're a woman. But anyways, what I was trying
Because you might not quote the right scriptures, right? Because that's what this is the characteristic of dogmatism as opposed to healthy dogma,
Mhm.
right? Which is merely serves as like signposts. Dogmatism, it always wants to pick and choose its particular bits. It doesn't want to look at the things that contradict it.
Well, see, what I'm wondering about, what I'm curious about is how much of these, you know, dogmatic people, how much of it is it really lying to yourself and doubling down on your own lies, like that you tell yourself, right?
Well, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think there is certainly an element of it that people kind of get exhausted, or they don't know where else to turn, so they turn to an ideology or turn to a particular church.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I'm just going to put all my eggs in this basket because it's too damn exhausting.
Yes.
Right. And then they do it, and you can do it for a while, right?
They're avoiding precisely the work that Tomberg is talking about in this chapter, which is the hard labor of going into darkness.
Right, that's what I was just going to say. There's the darkness, right?
The right of the black perfection.
Yeah, the black perfection.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that ultimately, I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the particulars of like the antinomies here. People can read the book if they're in that, because I think what's important in this, if you look at what Tomberg's synthesis is, his synthesis, I do want to talk about the empirical science faith antinomy in detail a little bit, because I think that's the one that's going to be most resonant with pretty much everyone in our age. But ultimately, his resolution of all three is simply the logos.
Yes.
Like that's right. Where he's coming to rest in his resolution. So that's where I think I wouldn't say that. And while he says that you can have other resolutions, and his isn't the only resolution, the fact that, and he's not giving that specific a resolution. He's just pointing toward the logos is where to look for the resolution. He's kind of like, so he's almost not giving you his resolution. He's pointing you where to look for it,
giving him
and inviting you to undergo that hermetic process of going into the darkness.
Yeah. How many people do you think are unaware of the fact that they have these dichotomies, that they're actually living like that?
Most.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier.
It's
easier. And the thing is, I mean, I think, if we think in terms of the path of Christian Hermeticism, not everybody is called to think it through.
Right. Yeah, right? I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's but the people who are capable of thinking it through and don't, because definitely the way what Tomberg sets out here and what Steiner sets out is, in most of these kinds of systems are in a way a very intellectual trip, right?
Yeah, they are.
It's very intellectual. I can't imagine going to my local Catholic parish or Lutheran parish and expecting people to pick it up and go, yeah, this is a great book, right? No, it's not for everybody.
That's
right.
True.
Right. And that's what kind of disturbs me about And I think what happens, we have social media specialization. So you got all these actual theologians and armchair theologians spouting off on stuff on social media or wherever, right? So it turns into this very intellectual academic enterprise, which actually pulls away from the life of faith and reality.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, of the everyday life, right? Of community or whatever.
It diminishes the everyday life. Like,
Yeah, that's that knowledge will antinomy that he talks about toward the end of the chapter.
exactly. Like, that's the one that resonated with me the most,
Yeah.
because when you're like, I don't have a post-secondary education. I didn't even graduate from high school, and I'm a farmer. Like, that just puts me at the bottom.
That is absolutely unbelievable to me, by the way, Shari, because you're so sharp and so insightful.
I'm at the bottom.
That might be part of it, though, too. The educational system is in such a state of
It's
disarray.
crap. Yeah. It is. I know. I've been in it forever, right? And what do you think? I'm a farmer. Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Because the people I work with are smart.
Compare. Like, I actually can't compare. Like, I can't say I learned more farming than I did in school, because I wasn't in school. But I have a sense that I would be able to say that.
Well, yeah. I mean,
maybe not. Maybe I would know Hegel, right?
well, most people don't know Hegel, even who graduated from college. I never encountered it. I had to do it on my own.
Well, people are still struggling to understand Hegel, to be honest. This is why you have like these political polar opposites that are both into Hegel, is because there's
well, and Hegel was to Tomberg's generation what Heidegger is to the post-Heidegger generations.
Right.
Because he kind of reset the table for philosophy. He gave people a new way to think about it, just like Heidegger did. And Heidegger is a little bit too late for Tomberg to have absorbed too much. I think he does mention him here and there, but not like,
he mentions Hegel a lot more.
Not in his formative intellectual upbringing, right?
Right.
I mean, because he and Heidegger were contemporaries.
Yeah.
I think he's not really Hegelian though in his resolution though, because he's not using negation.
Ultimately. No, but he's using that structure.
Yes. But he's going about it in a different way.
The Hegelian dialectic.
So he's under the influence of Hegel, but he's showing a path other than the one that Hegel took. I would say. I think,
I absolutely think so. So, but it's very different from these other letters, don't you think?
Yes, it is.
It's less. It's more technical, I find.
Yeah, I honestly read it 4 times because I kept getting more and more out of it every time. So.
Yeah, I just read it this morning, and but what I do is I found an audiobook version of it on YouTube, and
okay, that's cool.
I listen and read at the same time because I feel like I
reinforces
get a lot out of it. But like I said, the first part of this letter, I was just like, I think I'll just listen. See what these guys say.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can add anything.
I'm okay because there's so much in this chapter. I'm okay with us just skipping right on past. We can just kind of briefly summarize what he says about the realism idealism and realism nominalism divide. Essentially what he does is point toward the logos, and he says you don't have to choose. That through the logos you can have both.
Well, the logo synthesizes them.
Correct. Yeah.
That's my happy place.
And that's really, I mean, if you understand that, that's really all you need to take away from that section. But I think it's worth talking about the empirical science and faith divide a little bit more, because that's something that is kind of a big deal. And I think for us in our moment.
Even before that, I mean, I think before he gets into the antinomies, when he on page 200 in my book anyway, at the bottom he says that the hermit stands in the domain of reality not on 2 feet, but rather on 3. That is, he advances only through having touched the ground through immediate experience and at first-hand contact without intermediaries. That's phenomenology. This is his staff, right? personal immediate experience without intermediaries.
Yes.
He talks a lot about the lights, the light, the mantle, and the staff.
Mhm.
And the need for all three. And we can kind of talk a little bit more about, go ahead, Shari.
I just wanted to ask Michael, so the staff represents personal experience, or is it also, is the personal experience the synthesis itself?
No, well, the way he's talking about, so if you just imagine walking with a staff, it goes before you and tests the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it precedes intellectualization,
Right.
or understanding. Oh, there it is. Don't want to step there. I'll step here, right?
Is that, would that
But
be?
you still, the light is the intellect. So you still need the light in order to be able to see where you're stepping, but you still got to fill it out with the staff.
Right. And so here's another question then, would this be equivalent to Steiner's idea of intuition as spiritual touch?
Actually, this interesting. Maybe I read this chapter several times, as I mentioned, and to me, it's like this is the first time I really understood what Steiner was talking about when he talks about spiritual science, because I think the principle of the hermit that Tomberg is laying forth here, like especially in the later sections on when he talks about the antinomy between empirical science and faith, when he points toward that middle path there, that's spiritual science that he's talking about, where he's talking about the crucifying the bronze serpent, like that. The crucifying of the bronze serpent is spiritual science.
Well, I marked, I'm just going to read this really quick. It's on page 216 in the middle, right below that part where the verse Moses made a bronze serpent.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a little side note here, Steiner. It is
there you go.
It is also we who are in the desert of the present day who have need of the bronze serpent set on a pole in order to look at it and thus save our spiritual life. The synthesis of science and religion is not a theory, but rather the interactive consciousness of adding the spiritual vertical to the scientific horizontal, or in other words, the act of erecting the bronze spirit. When I read that, I thought that's exactly what Steiner was trying to do, right?
And I think, would you not agree that that's what John Vervaeke is trying to do as well?
No.
You don't think so, huh?
I don't get that feeling.
I don't get that feeling. But I do. I mean, this is not only is this pure Steiner, it's pure Goethe.
Oh, okay.
Goethe's, I don't know if I mentioned it on the show before, but Goethe's saying that if a man has science and religion, or has science and art, he has religion.
Right.
And if he has neither science nor art, give him religion. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. And that's something this kind of German idealism bequeathed to the world through Goethe, and Steiner picked it up. Tomberg picks it up.
Because the religion allows you to participate in it without understanding. Because not everyone has that. Not everyone is driven by that deep need to understand. Which is why Tomberg recognizes the role of the church in life.
Yeah, and it also points out that how jacked up our own society and cultures are with lifting. Basically, they're worshiping the golden calf of science right now, right? Mm-hmm. And it's leading to all kinds of sickness, right? Spiritual as well as physical illness and psychological. And that, I mean, if you were just any normal person, you look at that, there's something disordered here, right? There's something psychologically disordered or spiritually disordered, almost to the point of possession.
I was just listening to your podcast before I came on here, the new one.
With Arthur?
Yeah, with Arthur. And he mentioned disintegration. And I was just like, that's the nail on. He hit the nail on the head, right? That's what we're experiencing, disintegration.
Yep. Also, Grail Country audience, if you're not listening to Michael's podcast, you're missing out. Please listen to Michael's podcast. He's also on YouTube now. You want Regeneration podcast.
Regeneration podcast, yeah.
Yes. So look for it. It's worth your time. Great conversations.
I just stopped listening at that part and had to jump on here, but yeah, and that is where the dis-ease comes from, right? The disintegration. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. I think it might be worthwhile. Tomberg, before he talks about, like early on when he's talking about this antinomy between faith and science, he actually defines both faith and empirical science. It might be worth reading those definitions. Anyone feel like they
You know
would
what?
like to read his definition of faith section? It
So-
is right under it's my page numbers are different because I'm going for my PDF. But let me take a look at the hard copy here and see if I can find where it is in the hard copy.
I've got the antinomy, faith, empirical science.
Yeah, right under now, if you go that right, there is he sets off like faith as a lone word followed by a colon, and then he gives his definition right after that.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, great.
Faith, which can, when it is as a grain of mustard seed, transport mountains. Is this faith identical with faith belief, with the feeling of certainty with regard to a doctrine? Is it identical with faith confidence, with the absence of doubt, with respect to the sureness of the authority of a witness or testimony? Is it lastly identical with faith hope, with optimism as opposed to pessimism? Briefly, it is sufficient that we have no doubt at all in order to realize, quote, nothing will be impossible to you, unquote. You want me to keep going?
Yep, keep going. Read that whole section.
Okay, many mad people certainly display a complete absence of doubt with regard to their illusions or fixed ideas. They would therefore be able to do miracles if faith was nothing other than intensity of belief, confidence, and hope due to the absence of doubt. Because mad people certainly have this intensity. However, the intensity of belief, confidence, and hope alone is not the faith that the gospel has in view. There it is evidently a question not only of the intensity of certainty, but rather the intensity of the certainty of the truth. If this were not so, mad people would be, I don't know if I can say that.
Thaumaturgus. Yeah.
Okay. You have to tell me what that is after. And
Magicians.
madness, tradition?
Magician healers.
Oh, magician healers. Okay. And madness would be the ideal. A force which can move a mountain must be equal to that which piled it up. Therefore, the faith which can move mountains can neither be an intellectual opinion nor a personal feeling, no matter how intense. It must be the product of the union of the thinking, feeling, and desiring human being with cosmic being, with God. The faith which moved mountains is therefore a complete union, even if only for an instant, of man and God. This is why illusion can in no way engender faith, and this is also why miracles due to faith are testimonies of the truth, and not only of sincerity, of belief, confidence, and hope of the person through whom they are operated. Miracles are fruits of the union of the whole, concentrated human being with cosmic truth, beauty, and goodness, with God. They are operations of divine human magic, which is and always will be based on the spiritual constellation God-man, or in other words, they always operate in the name of Jesus Christ, conforming to the formula, my Father is working still, and I am working, John 5:17. The faith for which nothing is impossible is the state of soul where God works and the soul also works. It is the state of soul concentrated on the truth to which God adds the intensity of certainty and the power which renders miracles possible. It is magic due to the union of two mages, God and man. It is therefore neither logical certainty nor the certainty of authority, nor the acceptance of a testimony worthy of faith. It is the union of the soul with God, attained through effort of thought, through confidence in that which is worthy of confidence, through accepting testimonies worthy of faith, through prayer, meditation, contemplation, through practicing moral endeavor, and through many other ways and endeavors which help the soul to open to divine breath. Faith is divine breath in the soul, just as hope is divine light and love is divine fire in the soul.
Now, so I couldn't help but think in this especially when he's mentioning miracles here, right? And the madman's conviction that he's right. And I think we see all kinds of evidence of this in our culture these days with, a kind of madness that accompanies whatever, right? Well, people protesting about this or that. There's a kind of insanity, a mass hysteria that captures them. but look at, there are no miracles attending those.
Right.
Right. There's no kind of miracle. Where do you see miracle? And in fact, well, I'm going to get all topical on y'all today.
No, go for it.
Because I didn't know about, I had heard about it, but I didn't know what it was until they blew up the other day, the Georgia Guidestones. I had no idea what this was.
Last night too.
I didn't know what it was. I know, but and I think my wife had told me about it, and I saw something on social media, and I come in the house, I go,
okay, I missed this one. You guys are gonna have to fill me in.
You don't know about this?
No.
I didn't know about this.
So interesting.
Apparently, now I don't know. I am no expert on the Georgia Guidestones. Apparently, it's kind of like an American Stonehenge that was in Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And it had all these inscriptions on it, and one of them was that the optimum population for the planet Earth is 500 million. Right? So people suspected Bill Gates or other people were behind it. It's been there for a while. I didn't know anything about it. My wife knew about it. And what happened?
Yeah, that's definitely an idea that has no participation in the logos, because scarcity is a myth.
That's right. But here's what happened is it blew up.
Somebody blew it up. Yeah.
I don't know if somebody blew it up. I watched the video and
somebody blew it up.
No, they think,
yeah.
I think somebody did. I think I read, because I went crazy on that last night. Actually, I don't know where I heard it, but yeah, they did see, because I think they had cameras on it, right? And they did see a car.
But they didn't see anybody walk up to it.
No, they didn't know.
But they did. But it's so some people are wondering if lightning hit it. And I was getting really Old Testament about that for a minute there. You know, so who knows? I don't know what it was, but I don't know how I got there. But I mean, this idea of the kind of, I would call it, demonic possession that often possesses our culture at moments these days, which are filled with certainty on the parts of those possessed, but completely lacking in
miracles,
in truth, beauty, and goodness, and of course miracles, right? So you can tell there, so obviously it's a diabolical parody of divine inspiration, because nothing comes from it.
Well, it's reflective of that idea of survival of the fittest and Darwinian evolution that Tomberg contrasts with the idea of, a cooperation for being, as opposed to a survival of the fittest.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that, what comes to my mind is, the religiosity of secular society now, like how, washing of the feet ceremonies and erecting little altars and, all this stuff going on. And it's like they're Bruce Cockburn has a song called Waiting for a Miracle. It's like that. It's like they're trying to conjure up a miracle, right? With the ritual. You know what I mean?
Well, this is and Tomberg mentions it in here when he quotes from Levity in inverting the tetragrammaton, right? Where that's what black magic is. It's an inversion of what is sacred, right?
Yes.
It's and that's in a way what you describe, Shari, is a kind of black mass.
Yes. Yeah, and but then the sad part, the really terrible part for me when I see is that actually things just get worse.
Right. They do. And the thing is, so much of the apparatus of religious faith is attached to it. You have to subscribe to the creed, right? And you have to say it out loud, right? You got to say the creed out loud. You have to bow down to the right thing, whatever it happens to be. Remember when the Black Lives Matter thing started 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And people were demanding people bow down.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know. That's
which I remember watching that. This is bizarre.
Yeah.
But they the sad thing is, though, that they learned that from the church and some of the worst impulses of the church.
But that's true. That's true. But most people, when they want to enter the church and they say the creed, they're not doing it at gunpoint anymore.
Right,
At least certainly not now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So it take well, and this is how the devil works, is by taking sacred gestures and images and inverting them.
Inverting
Right.
them.
But it has impacted, historically has even impacted the church. I mean, it's like, that's the spirit of the Inquisition or the slaughter of the Saxons or any of the
But I don't know. I kind
more
of think,
ignominious moments in the history of the church.
I kind of think it's human nature, though, don't you think?
Yes, that's precisely it.
Yeah.
That's precisely it. And that's not really the church. It's the egregore of the church.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm bummed out. I'll just stop.
So what do we think about Tomberg's definition of faith there?
Yeah, that's that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Essentially, for if faith,
did I derail the conversation?
No, it's all right. No, we can go back to it because I think you're actually talking about it. I think because you're talking about what happens when that unity isn't there, right? When you don't have when there's an inversion, when it's man God instead of God man. You get what you were just talking about. So that this is a thing where the word order matters, right? So what the path of empirical science, completely divorced from any faith, is the path of the man God versus the path of the God man, which is that unity between the divine and human will.
Yeah. Which is why Tomberg, speaking of inverting, right? And he likes this. This is very popular in the early modern period to do sacred parody. And he does sacred parody. If you've ever heard the Our Mother prayer,
no,
and it doesn't mean making fun of either, but sacred parody is in a different book he comes up with this, and it's from a course he gave on the Our Father around the time of his conversion. And the Our Mother, it's a really beautiful prayer, but it's kind of structured like the Our Father is, right? So it's got the same number of petitions and things like this, right? But he does it here with the Creed,
right? With the Apostles, he has a scientific version of the Apostles' Creed,
and which is an interesting. I mean, that's one of his favorite rhetorical moves.
Well, it's revealing. It's revelatory when you read it. Right.
Yeah. And I think that let's go ahead, since we talked about his definition of faith. I think we should go ahead and go on with how he defines empirical science. And we could, rather than read the definition, basically, let me just summarize. He says that the scientific empirical science is actually doubt in the first place. That doubt is he says it's primus motor. I mean, it's like that's what it operates on. Yeah. And then he says that even though it is set in motion by doubt, it is fruitful, but this fruitfulness is limited within the realm of the horizontal. And then I think that's enough background for if someone wants to read the scientific creed.
I'll
jump into that. All right, go for it, Michael.
I have the page right here. Page 212 for those of you in TV land. Yeah. I believe in a single substance, the mother of all forces, which engenders bodies and the consciousness of everything, visible and invisible. I believe in a single Lord, the human mind, the unique son of the substance of the world, born from the substance of the world after centuries of evolution, the encapsulated reflection of the great world, the epiphenomenal light of primordial darkness, the real reflection of the real world, evolved through trial and error, not engendered or created, consubstantial with the mother substance, and through whom the whole world can be reflected. It is he who, for we human beings and for our use, has descended from the shadows of the mother substance. He has taken on flesh from matter through the work of evolution, and he has become the human brain. Although he is destroyed with each generation that passes, he is formed anew in each generation following, according to heredity. He is summoned to ascend the comprehensive knowledge of the whole world, to be seated at the right hand of the mother substance, which will serve him in his mission as judge and legislator, and his reign will never end. I believe in evolution, which directs all, which gives life to the inorganic and consciousness to the organic, which proceeds from the mother substance and fashions the thinking mind. With the mother substance and the human mind, evolution receives equal authority and importance, It is spoken through universal progress. I believe in one diligent, universal, civilizing science. I acknowledge a single discipline for the elimination of errors, and I wait the future fruits of collective efforts of the past for the life of civilization to come. So be it.
You know, when I read that, I thought Brett Weinstein would have loved it.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. But and be terrified of it at the same time. He's an interesting.
Well, that
cat.
last one really points out, it kind of, to me anyway, I don't know how to say this, but it shows where it all leads to, right?
Trust the science, Sherry. Come on. Trust the science.
Exactly. The one diligent, universal, civilizing science, single discipline, collective efforts, right? Like it's so hyper-focused and singular. Terrible.
And wrong.
Wrong.
Right.
And essentially wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in fact, like an inversion, in fact, which is which is the part you already talked about, Michael, where he compares it to the inversion of the tetragrammaton, where the passive principle is the root as opposed to the active principle.
But you know, him talking about that inversion actually enlightened me about the real order of things in the tetragrammaton. That was helpful.
Yeah, I can. Why don't I go ahead and share that section? So he's actually he's following Eliphas Levi here. As the tetragrammaton is the law of causality, the sequence, active principle, passive principle, neutral principle, and their manifestation, or again, effective cause, material cause, final cause, and the phenomenon, and consequently of reason, he concluded that the inversion of the tetragrammaton is a magical formula for chaos and irrationality. Yet it is precisely the inverted tetragrammaton which is the arcanum of empirical science, because it is the passive principle of substance or matter which empirical science considers as first, as the principle par excellence, whilst the neutral principle, the human mind, follows, and the active principle, the method, concludes the series. In fact, in the name Yod He Vau He, if Yod is the active principle, effective cause, the first He is the passive principle, material cause, Vau is the neutral principle, final cause, and the second He is the whole phenomenon which results from it. Then the inverse name, He Vau He Yod, would be the series passive principle, neutral principle, passive principle, active principle, or matter, reason, evolution, scientific method. The series How Ve He Yod means to say that nothing precedes matter, that nothing moves it, that it moves from itself, that mind is the child of matter, that evolution is matter which engenders mind, and that lastly, mind once born is the activity of matter in evolution, which becomes conscious of itself and takes evolution in its hands. The inverted tetragrammaton is without doubt the formula synthesis of empirical science. Is it that of chaos and irrationality? No, it is the mirroring of the formula spirit, matter, evolution, individuality of the sacred name. It is not the formula of irrationality no more than that it is of intelligence. It is the formula of cunning, ruse, i.e. of reflected intelligence. It is not a logical formula, a formula of the logos, but rather it is that of the serpent of Genesis, who was the most cunning of all living creatures, and whose aspiration is the expansion of consciousness in the horizontal, the fields. The ultimate aim of the logic of cunning is that of the serpent. It is not to become God, but to become like God, to become like. This is the essence of cunning, and it is also the meaning of scientific faith, the scientific creed, and at the same time, only a paraphrase and development of the promise of the serpent. Your eyes will be open and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:5.
Yeah. Which is actually a description of the last 2 years. And I'm totally serious, right?
Yeah.
It's cunning. I mean, we have seen nothing but cunning.
Mm-hmm.
And it persists. I mean, just yesterday, I was picking my daughter up from her job as she works at an ice cream shop. and she was upset because the girl she works with, a 17-year-old girl, was upset because her boyfriend's father died, and he died because he got the you know what, and he started having heart pain like the next day, and they called EMS, which it took them a half an hour to get there. It was too late by the time they got there. And cunning.
Yeah.
I mean, people are convinced to do things injurious to their health and think it's healthy by cunning.
Yeah.
And we've already seen how much deceit has accompanied this phenomenon, right? How much deceit and disinformation, and it's not from the people they accuse of disinformation, because if we look back 2 years ago, the people like Brett Weinstein, the people who were saying what was actually going on and got canceled then, all of a sudden they're right now, right?
Well, you know, Alex Berenson just won his Twitter war.
Yeah.
And
he was one of them, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the tweet that he put out actually came true.
They all did, yeah.
And that was the reason that they couldn't keep him off Twitter anymore, because they're actually saying those things that
That's right.
Out. They're saying those things right now to encourage people to get boosted. And they
I
banned
know.
him from Twitter for saying them a year ago.
You see from a year ago, like the CDC and these places will issue these things about how safe everything is, and you won't catch it if you get it. We know it's not true,
right?
You know, and people were saying it wasn't true then.
Yeah.
And I saw some recently. I mean, you've probably seen these posts too on Twitter and whatever. People that say, "I don't know about you, but if we're going by track record, I'm going with conspiracy theorists from now on," right?
Yeah.
Because they have a better track record than even the NGOs, right?
Well, yeah. It's I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is
yet the chief executive of my state has decided that having up-to-date boosters should be a contingency for my continued employment. Speaking of which, Girl Country now has a Patreon.
That's right.
See the link in the description below. Also, like and subscribe.
That's right. Two can play at this game, Governor.
It's awesome. Yeah, but that is, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's not worshiping at the altar of science, but somehow it feels like it. And this inversion, right, where everybody's performing these rituals and hoping for this miracle, and it just gets worse.
I think it's worshiping at the altar of science reduced to the will to power itself.
Well, that too, yeah. Yeah.
I think really that's what it is, where it's like it no longer is concerned with, it has no longer any concern for truth. Only for power.
Yeah.
But the seeds of that are within science. And Tomberg actually talks about this. Not too far from where we were reading.
Yeah, not to completely disparage science. I mean, if you want to know how science is done, just read Goethe.
No, he's not disparaging science. He just says that we need to that it needs to be conscious of the vertical aspect.
Yeah, you got to check yourself, science.
Right. Right, exactly. Let's see.
Well, he said, science reduces quality to quantity.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's actually that's really important.
Now, when I was reading the scientific creed earlier, he's got the part about heredity, right? Which is the big thing that, you know, Darwinian science pushes, is heredity. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this. This is kind of a cool thing. Steiner's take on that, which is very Goethean, is that, so if you look at children, they have two, we all do, but children have two things kind of contending in their souls as they're growing in their physical body. It's manifesting in their physical bodies, is that there's a stream of heredity, which you get from your parents, and there's the stream of the individuality, right? So Now his whole thing, this is way back, why he was not too crazy about vaccines, or what, I shouldn't say not crazy about vaccines, I should say why he was supportive of children going through what we used to call childhood illnesses,
Yeah.
like measles and chickenpox, or the stuff I don't know if you guys had them. I had them all.
Well, he also
had them all.
had this notion that in the future that vaccines might actually be used to suppress the spiritual
right.
element within man,
He did, and the other, where I was
which
going,
is
though,
really seems prescient and terrifying
I-
right now.
he called the bees. I think he called that one too. But the point I'm trying to get to is that what he pointed to is those childhood illnesses, when kids get them, it throws off heredity. So if you, and very phenomenologically, he would say, now watch. I mean, you can see a child prior to having those illnesses, and they look a lot like their parents. But when they go through those illnesses and they can fight it off on their own, they throw off heredity, then they start to look like their individual self and less like you say clones, for instance, but it's an exaggeration. And I heard this many years ago, and I've watched it with my own kids, right? And with children I was teaching, because I have taught a lot of kids, and I knew all their parents, right? And you could see, especially when they would get to that usually age 7, they would go through chicken pox, and it would sweep through the entire school. The kids who hadn't had it already would get it then. And now nobody gets it. Now they have a vaccine for it, right? And I don't think my 2 youngest, they're 11 and 13, I don't think they had chicken pox. All the rest of them did.
Yeah.
They all had whooping cough, believe it or not. But that was about it. I mean, because none of that stuff is out there anymore. So Steiner would say this hampers the soul's incarnation, the individuality's incarnation, and ability to throw off heredity. So it's kind of like being chained to what your parents were, and that includes not only their propensity toward disease or whatever, but it kind of weakens the human race.
Well,
what his
right,
argument was.
and chained to the prince of this world, chained to the principle of evolution by groping trial, the principle of the serpent, and not being
and chained
open to the call of becoming a true individual, or a true person, which is the logos,
and chained to perpetual pharmacology.
Right. Right. Well, that's really that's a particularly telling. That's a particularly telling phrase that Michael, especially in light of Girard, and when you think of the pharmakos. So
yeah.
Can you expand on that?
The pusher, man. The pusher, man.
The pusher. Yeah.
That's I always when this started, when they were pushing this stuff, I kept posting The Pusher by Steppenwolf on social media. I don't think that people got. Well, he really likes that song. I don't really get it. God damn, the pusher, man.
Yeah.
What does Girard say about pharmakos?
Well, it's related to the idea of the founding sacrifice.
Okay.
Which would underlie basically the satanic, quite frankly, the satanic order.
Yeah.
And it's all, and also it's the word, I can't remember where it is in Revelation that it's used, that the Antichrist, employs it, pharmakos.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Which means drug, right? I think different translations have different words for it, but that's kind of the gist of it. Which, when all this stuff was happening, some people were reading Revelation. Go, see, it's right there. But it's worth thinking about, right?
And for Tomberg, like, that ultimately is the end goal of the principle of like Darwinian evolution, which he's not denying is real in the phenomenological world, right? He's saying that he's not denying it. What he's saying is that it's creation without grace. It's its own path.
It's pure nature.
Right.
Right.
Right. Which ultimately isn't real.
Right. No.
No,
Which is, and that's why I write about that in the submerged reality, because that's where everything went off the rails.
yes.
Right.
With pure nature.
Yeah.
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 Right. Yeah, I think David Bentley Hart says something about that in his new book too. That if pure nature existed at all, it would be nothing other than the fall itself.
Yeah.
And that's right.
And he got that. I don't know if he got it from, but John Milbank had him off at the pass on that one in his book, The Suspended Middle, if you know that book.
So can you briefly define pure nature just for those who might confuse what we're saying with like
pure nature is this idea natura pura, which came up in the early modern period, well, in the scholasticism, especially in the early modern period, where theologians started to question whether or not there could be anything in creation void of God's grace, right? Could there be a pure nature, a nature that does not have God's grace in touching it, right? What do you think, Shari?
personally?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it doesn't make
Right.
any sense, right?
No,
Right.
no, there's no pure nature. No.
But,
So is this like the
but certain theological systems like Calvinism, for example, are entirely dependent upon the idea of a natura pura.
But it actually came up, it started in Catholic theology.
Yep.
And a person who is trained in that, as I point out in the submerged reality, was Descartes.
Mm-hmm.
He was at ground zero for pure nature in his education, which is what his whole project is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
His whole project is pure nature, right? If you, and this goes back to William of Ockham, right? You know, don't multiply entities.
And the reason for this, though, ultimately ties back to this whole concept of the will to power, because, like as Tomberg says in this text, like on the horizontal plane, the promise of this serpent is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that it does give power on the horizontal plane.
Well, yeah, because everything's dead. Everything's dead to you, right?
And that's pure nature is what modern science is.
Right.
That's how it looks at the world. And that's why I've been so interested for a long time is in the alternative modernity that didn't let go of the idea of the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Yeah.
That we see in mentioned before Robert Flood. He's in the submerged reality, but you see him also in a lot of the Hermetic philosophers of the 16th and 17th century who were rejecting that Baconian empiricism and especially Cartesian metaphysics.
And Blake too, right?
Blake totally rejected it later. And so he's part of this, and Arthur and I were talking about it the other day, is that this alternate modernity, which we're part of.
Yes.
That was good. We're in that stream, right?
Yeah.
But the mainstream doesn't think we exist.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Milbank is really great for tracing the history of this alternate modernity.
Don't you think that kind of ties back though into when he talks about I can't remember which chapter it is, maybe it's the magician, but the hermeticist is just kind of being in the background, like doesn't put himself forward, right? And I would say that like this parallel, this hidden modernity it's hermetic in nature, right?
And you can see why in this chapter, because what is the role of the hermit? The role of the hermit is peacemaker.
Yeah. We should get into that.
Yeah.
We should get into that because that's.
And just I want to interject that because I looked it up. In Revelation, it's chapter 18, and pharmakeia is translated often as sorcery.
Yeah.
Right.
But what's where you get our word pharmacy?
Right.
Pharmaceutical.
Well,
company.
and sorcery is, that's ultimately what science is too. And I'm not I really mean that.
No, it is.
Yeah.
I understand.
And so
and it's sorcery because it's seeking to do like magical things independent of
Manipulate.
the will of God and completely denying the vertical exists at all.
Now, do you guys know this book? What's it called? Renaissance Magic, Eros and Renaissance Magic by Ioan Culianu, who's a Romanian scholar, expert at magic stuff, and he taught at University of Chicago, and he was murdered in the bathroom by Ceausescu's thugs.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Now, but this book is fantastic, and one of the things he points out to where magic still is, and I think this really points to the last 2 years as well, is in advertising.
Yeah.
And in mass hysteria, right? Those things are all, that's magic because you're changing the way people think about the world.
Well, and also you're trying to impose your will,
exactly,
which is the opposite, which God never does.
Trust science. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's done through slogans, just like we might look at a 16th century grimoire and go, oh, that's so silly. I would never fall for that. Trust science, right? Or you get these incantations, these spells that are repeated over and over until you believe it.
Can I get the title of that really quick again so I can put it in the show notes, Michael?
I don't know if it's upstairs. I think it's Culiano is Couliano, and it's Eros and Renaissance Magic or something like that is the title. It's a mind-blowing book.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Somewhere I recently read, I've been reading a bunch of stuff lately and I don't know where I read it. Maybe it was in Submerged Reality even, about the witch doctor who points at the person. Oh, I know, it was in Matthias Desmet's book. That's what it was. He talks about the witch doctor who points at the person and places a curse on them, right? And then they go off to their hut and they immediately begin to fail physically and die. And he was just talking about the cycle, and then the opposite is also true, right? To bless, to point at someone and bless. Does Steiner talk about this at all? Okay.
Yes, he talks about it in terms of education. Not about cursing, and then I recall, but blessing. And this, I think, goes to our earlier conversation about throwing off heredity, where he talks about if a child doesn't learn how to come to reverence, which is a big thing. If you ever go to a Waldorf school, they really, I don't know if they still do, but when I was there, you really try to cultivate reverence in the children,
right,
especially around the Christian festivals, that's why I wonder if they're still doing it. Coming to silence and reverence. But he said, if a child can't come to that as a child, how will he or she ever raise her hand in blessing when they're old?
Yeah.
So I think these things are supremely important and intimately connected and generally ignored in our society.
Well, it was just really fascinating to me because this placing of the curse, like the person is not poisoned, there nothing foreign enters their body except for the words, and then they literally die. Right, they literally fail on their own.
Well, this is the danger of listening to voices on the horizontal plane, right? This is the same thing that allowed Eve to hear the voice of the serpent.
Right.
So it's actually, even though that's not science, it's still sorcery, and it's still a horizontal operation where the witch doctor is imposing their will and trying to manipulate reality through their magical power. So it operates in accordance with the same corrupt principle as modern science does. They're actually there's a likeness there.
Which is why in exorcisms, the priest will tell you, don't ever listen to what the demon's saying to the person. Don't ignore it. Stick to the prayers. Ignore what they're saying, because they have angelic intelligences that are warped, but they're still angelic intelligences. They're smart. They know a lot of stuff. Cunning,
the ruse.
But you can't listen to them.
Right.
This is get into a conversation.
This is the nature. This is what is behind the idea of the devil appearing as an angel of light.
And that's and we have had that over and over again.
I've been going through the book of Job with Jess, this other guy, in our little Voxer group, and Eliphaz has this vision, like he has this dream, right, where the spirit comes and basically says, is any man righteous? Is any man, that's kind of the
Doubt,
message.
right?
And but what's interesting, what I found interesting when I thought about it, was that that's actually what Eliphaz believes. Like he already believes that nobody's righteous, right? And so like it's like this, it's like, I don't know, it's like some kind of thermal baking in of an enamel or something. It's like,
Well,
it's like, oh, let's just concrete that whole idea in there, right? And I mean, we call this confirmation bias, right? In a way. And
this is why the hermit has the staff, though, and this is what he talks about in those, when Tomberg talks early in the chapter about the antinomies between realism, idealism, and realism, nominalism. He's saying that the reason that you need to basically the light of the logos is because there are things in the world that are not real.
Yeah.
And that are cunning.
That are cunning.
Cunning. And that's I guess that's why I thought of that, because of the cunning of that, right? Of actually just reinforcing what the person already believes is true. So yeah.
So we already talked about, so he set up his definition of faith, his definition of empirical science, and then essentially he suggests that the bronze serpent or the cross is the way of bringing these together, quantity and quality.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about that about the idea anymore? The quantity, quality of the bronze serpent and the cross?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I want to go to the gift of Black perfection.
Okay, go for it. Let's go for it.
Okay, so I'll just read. I just want to read the first paragraph there.
Sure.
The arcana of the tarot, I must stress, are spiritual exercises, and the ninth arcanum, the Hermit, is one of them. For this reason, the preceding meditations on the three antinomies aim not so much at a solution of the this is just,
it's like, a hard word to say.
Them things, yeah.
Antinomies that will please everyone, but more to encourage spiritual endeavor oriented toward the solution of these, antinomies.
Those things, yeah.
You can certainly resolve them in a more profound and satisfying way. It is a matter, in the case of the solutions that I've proposed above all, of a concrete illustration, which is, I know, far from being the best, of an individual endeavor by way of a special spiritual exercise. This consists in setting before you a thesis and an antithesis, both as clearly as possible. I should say as crystallized light. I like that. In such a way that all intellectual light, which is at your disposal, may then be consumed by these two opposing theses. You will then arrive at a state of mind in which all that you know and clearly perceive is put into the thesis and antithesis, so that they may be like two rays of light, whilst your mind itself is plunged into darkness. You know and see nothing more than the light of these two contrary theses. Beyond them, there remains only darkness. And it is then that one undertakes the essential thing about this exercise, namely the endeavor to draw light from the darkness, i.e., an effort aiming at knowledge which appears to you to be not only unknown, but also unknowable. And this is what happens to me when I wrestle with a paradox. And it's kind of what he's talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's exactly what he's talking about.
Right. And so it's like, and I've discovered that if you get down into that darkness, you can actually resolve it.
Well, yeah, that's the kind of key to mysticism. especially if you look at John Donne in his poetry and his preaching, he's kind of obsessed with paradox.
Yeah,
Because
I am too, actually.
well, it is. I mean, and there's a book called Paradoxa Epidemica, by Rosemary Colley. It's belonged to old book. I mean, from the 60s, probably, maybe even earlier, which explored this in especially in Renaissance poetry. And what's his name? Stanley Fish has this book called Self-Consuming Artifacts, which is mind-blowing about 17th century poetry. He does George Herbert. And the whole idea is that when you get into these paradoxes, right, whether it's about, life, death paradox, life in death, death in life, or whatever it happens to be, which very often come up in mystical writing and mystical poetry. What
Yes.
happens by it is that our reliance on logic, gets us there. It's like we're and Stanley Fish uses it as an example of, like, you're climbing a ladder, and while you're climbing the ladder, somebody's knocking out the rungs underneath where you just were, so you got no place to go.
Mhm.
Which
Yeah.
is kind of what Tomberg's talking about here, into this darkness. You have no place to go.
Yeah.
So you finally get to the point of, I wouldn't call it, maybe surrender as a way to talk about it. This is the Beguine mystics would often speak in terms of surrender to the love of God, right? Because I'm no longer trying to figure it out. This is a kind of a very, very much, these people were inspired by Dionysius the Areopagite's mystical theology, which is this kind of apophatic theology. And this is what I see in the latter of Jacques Derrida, where he becomes, as far as I'm concerned, and he's really obsessed with the inadequacies of language and paradox as well, because it leads you to another kind of knowing.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It leads you to a deeper kind of knowing that even becomes, that you can't really explain, I think, except for in poetic language.
Right.
Does this connect to the Hegelian idea of the negation of negation? So going back to your initial remark, is this actually more Hegelian than I gave it credit for early on?
No, I don't think it is. I think this is more like what Tomberg's talking about, because Tomberg is kind of steeped in those medieval and Renaissance mystics, John of the Cross, right? So I think he's in a way, if anything, Tomberg baptizes Hegel.
Yes, he definitely thinks Hegel is incomplete. That's clear.
He takes him to the next level, right?
Correct. Yeah,
He levels
he's trying
up
to go beyond Hegel. Yeah,
and that's what. And for him, like you said, it's the cross, or it's the logos, but it's even. It is that, but that makes it. If you say that's the cross of the logos, that almost makes it like too easy.
Yeah,
like for instance, I saw this video a friend of mine did on Ari Thorenson. You know who that is? He's an anthroposophical doctor or veterinarian, and he's kind of clairvoyant. And he's talking about taking the what, and but you just take it, but you put Christ in the middle of it. I'm like, that's crap. Yeah. That is not a good idea. Don't listen to what he's telling you.
Yeah.
Well, it is. It works so long as you have a consciousness of the fact that you are also called to be on that cross.
Yeah, I don't think it works.
That it's not just.
I don't know about that, but I think what does work. I mean, it's like playing Russian roulette and trusting Christ that you won't shoot yourself in the head.
Yeah,
you're asking for it, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, in this kind of conceptual realm that he's talking about, the realm of ideas, that does coming to climbing that ladder and having somebody kick out the rungs underneath you where you have no place to go, then you get to the place you need to go to. It's something also that you see in one of, I think, the greatest books ever written, The Cloud of Unknowing.
Right.
That's what entering the cloud of unknowing is.
Well, there's a, like, I'm just have to talk about this from my own experience, but some people hate paradox. Like, when you talk about paradox, people are just like, yeah, it's a paradox. And then they just dismiss it as a paradox, and that's the only way that they can actually deal with it. And for me, when I get to that place where there's a gravity about the paradox, I've called it, like earlier on in this journey, I called it a holy thing. It's holy, right? There's something holy about it. That's the only word I could use to describe it. But when I get to that place of gravity where I feel like I'm gonna either have to just run away, as screaming from the building, or then there's a thrill to seek that accompanies it, right? That's how I feel about it. But it's terrifying at the same time. And it is like he describes, it is this, going down into this utter darkness because your mind can't sort it, right?
But then that's how you create light from darkness, and that's what he's getting at here.
Yeah, and I like 3 years ago, I had the obsession with paradox, but I wouldn't have understood what he said here until now.
And I love, and I think when I first read it, the thing that really stuck with me more than anything else was when he has this analogy about mixing of colors,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, from Wilhelm Oswald's book on dying materials,
Right, the cone, the double cone.
I love that. I mean, I really love that. It's a really beautiful way
it really is a
about
wonderful illustration. Yeah, and yeah, between the polarities there. Do we want to share an image of that?
Sure.
That what we're talking about? I think I've got.
I got it.
Oh, you got it? Okay, cool. Yeah, right there. Well, a little bit further. Yeah, there we go. So this is the image. Yeah.
The double cone.
The double cone, where you have the white point at the top, and then the dark point at the bottom, and then the equator is where you have all the colors.
Which is kind of cool. And actually reminded me of when Shari was speaking a second ago about gravity, right? Talking about the thing that's pulling you down, right?
Yeah.
Into that dark. And again, you see Goethe haunting this. Because, Goethe, in his problem with the science of his age, right? With Sir Isaac Newton and gravity, right? Gravity's everything.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know what Goethe's opposite of gravity is?
No.
Levity.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
And he sees that in Der Pflanze, in the plant, right?
Yeah.
Because there's something. How come all plants aren't vines is crawling on the ground, right?
Yeah.
There's something in the plant and in us that brings us to uprightness. In Steiner, for instance, a great moment in human development, and this is when you're a Waldorf teacher or you pay attention to this kind of stuff, is when a child comes to uprightness, when they can pull themselves up and stand upright.
Yes.
Which is why it's very often discouraged to put kids in bouncy chairs or in a seat before they're ready to sit up on their own.
Yeah.
Because there's something important that happens when a child goes from the horizontal to the vertical.
Right. Yeah. George MacDonald says that's what God does. God straightens a man, right? Straightens him. And
and that's what Goethe calls the forces of levity.
Yeah.
And you even think just metaphor, right? When we use those words, levity and gravity, when we're talking about emotion, right?
I was just thinking that, that you can apply that on all those different levels, right? Like the
fiat lux.
Yeah, there's something really interesting about levity. We were having a little conversation about that amongst friends about humor, and that was one thing that Soloviev really embodied, right? Was this. He was parroting things and being really goofy and
apparently he had a really ridiculous laugh.
Yes. Yeah. And he said that to him human beings are animals that laugh, because they're the only ones that laugh. And I've always had a fascination with that
funny.
laughter, right? Because go ahead.
You're reminding me of something now. Guy I know, a friend of mine from a long time ago, he's probably, he's got to be 74, I'm guessing. And he had met people when he was a young man who had actually known Rudolf Steiner. And he said, it's weird, man, because you would talk to these guys and they would describe Rudolf Steiner, and every time you heard something, you felt like they were talking about a different guy, except they would always get to, and boy, was he funny.
Yeah.
He had the greatest sense of humor. He was always telling jokes. And apparently the people, the executives of the Vorstand, the governing body of the Anthroposophical Society, would tell Dr. Steiner, maybe not so many jokes this evening, huh? Wait, I got some material. I've been working at it. I'm gonna try. I don't imagine that Steiner would do a stint at the Comedy Store, but he had lots of jokes. It was very funny.
Right.
Yeah. But what's interesting though is
which are edited out of the lectures.
Laughter is a way of transcending, right? Like it's actually almost an out of body experience, because what you do is you remove yourself from the gravity of something, and you look at it in an isolated way, and it becomes hilarious, right?
In a lot of really good humor, there's also like an acceptance of paradox and a kind of laughing at the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
And just kind of accepting, there's an acceptance.
Yeah.
There's a humility to it as well.
Well, it's transcendence, and which is what you were talking about when you said, that the opposite of gravity for Goethe was levity, right? And that's what laughter is. It's levity. It's transcendence.
Lighten up.
Really,
and everything that implies, right?
Right.
Bring some more light into it and lighten up at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
So he goes on to use this whole Oswald's colored body to talk about like basically the hermit and hermetic meditation. He says, and I don't know what page this is on for you guys.
219.
Okay.
Oswald
Yeah. Invented by its maker toward useful ends. So the next paragraph. We are by analogy, therefore, to conceive of the white point or north pole of the colored body as that of wisdom. The equator is that of the family of particular sciences of human knowledge, and the black point or south pole is that of ignorance. Now, wisdom is the synthesis above of all the particular sciences of human knowledge. It contains them simultaneously, undifferentiated within itself, as white light contains the 7 prismatic colors. The neutralization or synthesis of the binary yellow-blue, for example, can therefore be affected by rising toward the white point of wisdom. Another method of finding the third term for the binary yellow-blue is that of finding the point of transition from yellow to blue on the scale of the equator of prismatic colors, which is exactly at the middle of the distance separating the most yellow point from the most blue point. This would be the green point. Lastly, there is a third method of neutralization, that in the direction beneath the equator. This is the direction toward the black point, where the particular colors disappear into darkness. The neutralization of the binary yellow-blue is therefore effected according to this method when a point on the scale of the reverse cone of the colored body is found where the yellow and blue cease to be discernible in the dark brown which they become. If we now take instead of the binary yellow-blue, that of the mathematics of descriptive science, or mathematics phenomenalism, and apply the 3 methods of neutralization here, we obtain a formula of transcendental synthesis, another that is a compromise or equilibrium, and a third that is indifferent, as follows. 1. Transcendental synthesis. God geometrizes. Numbers are the creators of phenomenon, the formula of Plato and the Pythagoreans. 2. Equilibrium. The world is order, i.e. phenomena display limits due to the equilibrium that we call measure, number, and weight, the formula of Aristotle and the Peripatetics. 3. Indifference. Our mind reduces phenomena to numbers so as to make it easier for the work of the mind to handle them. Formula of the skeptics. We see, therefore, that Platonism is oriented toward the white point of wisdom. Aristotelianism moves toward the equatorial region of precise distinctions, and skepticism tends toward the black point of nihilism. With respect to Hermeticism, the hermit holds the lamp, which represents the luminous point of transcendental synthesis. He is wrapped in a mantle hanging in folds for deploying the particular qualities which have their place in the region of the equator, and he supports himself with his staff for feeling his way in the domain of darkness. In the region of the reverse cone culminating in the black point, he is therefore a peripatetic Platonist en route around the equator, making use of skepticism, his staff, while he walks. This is why the traditional interpretation of the ninth arcanum is prudence.
And notice how he just equalized the antinomy Platonist Aristotelian.
Yep.
Right?
A peripatetic Platonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, if you know the saying from Samuel Taylor Coleridge that every person is either born a Platonist or a Aristotelian. Ever hear that one?
No, huh?
I think it's true.
You think so?
Yeah, people tend to do that.
Yeah.
People tend to be either of a scientific bent, like a Aristotelian, or a more Platonic religious bent.
Well, that would make like the
naturally.
Christian synthesis that you see of Plato and Aristotle in the Christian Neoplatonic tradition would kind of be in a similar vein to what Tomberg is talking about here.
But I definitely think the Christian the scholastic preoccupation with Aristotle is what led to Descartes and pure nature.
Yeah, to emphasizing Aristotle too much and not having that synthesis that you see in the earlier scholastics or in the Christian Neoplatonists before the scholastic tradition.
I mean, you certainly don't see it in Bonaventure.
No.
And you don't really see it in St. Thomas either, but you see it.
St. Thomas is, I mean,
you
St.
see
Thomas.
You see it after St. Thomas, though.
Correct.
For sure.
Yeah, sure. Scotus, Occam. Yeah. That's where you see it.
Those bastards. Yeah. Well, I'm just telling you how it is, people, right?
Yeah.
You hear me? You know what I'm saying? But
I'm sure they had the best of intentions.
But what you just read, Nate, which he gets into. But then he talks a little bit later about where does the Hermeticist fit in this panorama of psychological types or spiritual types or whatever you want to call them.
Right.
And he characterizes it as a path of solitude.
Right.
Because you don't really belong anywhere.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, like he says, the Son of Man has no place to hang his head, right? To lay his head.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that. I've found on this kind of basically I've been on a hermetic path since I read this book. I don't think I would have described it like that when I was even 30. But
I think reading this book made me realize that I've been on a hermetic path my entire life.
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah. I mean, because you fit, but you don't fit. Right.
Yeah. Right.
I can hang with these people. I don't really fit in.
Yeah.
But I like them. Right.
It explains a lot of why I think the way I do about a lot of things. I was the part where he talked about how the Hermeticists cannot really join in the collective furor.
It's hard.
And passion, like that really resonated with me. I mean, that's probably why I'm a Christian anarchist. Like, because I just don't.
Because I refuse to join any group that would have me as one of its members.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you can't. Here's the thing, though, is that you can't be the peacemaker. That really was resonant with me too. Is like you can't play he sees the hermit as playing the role of the peacemaker, and if you can't be the peacemaker if you're caught up in any of that collective furor, because then you're joining a side.
If you're a subscriber,
you're a subscriber. You cannot be a peacemaker anymore.
Not that you can't subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen.
No, yes, you can subscribe to this channel and still be a peacemaker.
And to Nate's Patreon too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to read this. He says, "He who seeks synthesis, i.e., true peace, can never take part for or against opposing things. And since it is precisely taking sides which groups people into communities and divides them into sections, he is necessarily alone. He can neither embrace any human cause without reserve, nor be opposed to any human cause, being loyal to the cause of the truth, which is synthesis and peace. This is why he is condemned, whether he wants it or not, to profound solitude. He is a hermit in his inner life, whatever his outer life may be. He will never be given the joy of plunging himself in national, social, or political collectivity. He will never have the blissful experience of having shared out the weight of responsibility with the multitude. And he can never fit in at festivals or orgies in the sense implied in the word we French, we Germans, we Jews, we Republicans, we Royalists, or we Communists. The intoxication of plunging into collectivity is not given to him. He must be sober, i.e. alone, because the pursuit of truth through synthesis, which is peace, implies prudence, and prudence is solitude.
Yep.
And down on the next page, it says here, peace is unity in diversity. There is no peace where there is no diversity, and there is no peace when there is only diversity. I love
Wow, that's not relevant at all to our time.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that little passage to the next diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting I'm called to.
Right. I mean,
workshop.
that's just so perfect.
Oh
Yes.
man, academic workshops, man. That's yeah.
I love the line of that the hermit is with his mantle lamp and stuff is a traveling salesman of peace. He makes his way from opinion to opinion, from belief to belief, from experience to experience, and traces his route. So he traverses the way of peace between opinions, beliefs, and experiences, being always equipped with his mantle, lamp, and staff. He does so alone because he walks and no one can walk for him, and because his work is peace, which is prudence and therefore solitude. That's just so great.
And then he says, but don't take pity on him.
Right, exactly. Oh, read that
For
part.
he
Sherry.
has his joys, and these are intense. When, for example, he meets another itinerant hermit on the way, hello.
Hey, howdy.
He figures out he's not crazy.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
What
right.
joy and what happiness there is in this meeting of two solitary travelers. This joy has nothing in common with that of the intoxication of feeling free from the burden of responsibility which plunging into collectivity brings about. On the contrary, it is the joy of responsibility encountering the same responsibility, which together share and alleviate the responsibility of a third, one who said of his earthly life, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah.
Or it is the master whom all itinerant hermits follow and serve. It is then the joy of two who meet one another in his name and where he is present.
Wherever two or more are gathered.
And, honestly, like, I actually wrote a poem called Solitude. Should I read it?
Go for it.
Let me just grab it here. Because it kind of illustrates this joy, this intense, and it's got colors in it too. Just realized. I have a lot of colors in my poetry, actually. Greens and blues, full color and hues, ripples and waves, feet move and sway. There it flies with wings outstretched, tips fanned out. That's always the clue. Ripples and waves emanate out. The whole earth vibrates with them, touching my mind, my heart. Moss, lichen, old man's beard cling and live for centuries. Trees whisper, and the wind passes right through me. A warm embrace from behind, unexpected wrapping around me. I lay into it, rest from the unrest. Somehow the air feels transformative, pure, foreign. This aloneness isn't alone. It sees me, it knows me. I need this. I need to breathe it into my eyes. I need to breathe. Once I knew fear. It is you that I long for, unafraid, and I would turn and turn and turn and turn in it until it turns into me. That's that intense
Beautiful.
joy,
Thanks,
that
Sherry.
yeah, that he's talking about here, like, don't feel sorry for the hermit. My family, they're always like, it's kind of like a trademark. that I'm alone, right? She's always alone. I hear whispers, she's always alone. And my son, when I went to visit my son in Berlin, his girlfriend just felt so bad about going to work and leaving me in the apartment by myself. And my son looked at her and he said, my mom is so used to being alone. She loves it. And it's true. I have this
and yet people gather around you too at the same time. This is the irony here, because this is the aspect that he talks about at the very beginning of the chapter, with the hermit as the good father, or the spiritual father, like the one to whom the youth know to go to seek wisdom.
Well, it's also that peacemaking thing, right? Like that.
Right.
That peacemaking thing just makes everyone is welcome, right? Nothing is not welcome.
Right.
I think, to the hermit, right?
Right.
Like he has it. What does it say here? He makes his way from opinion to opinion, from belief to belief, from experience to experience, right? This really reminded me of George MacDonald's story about the little girl collecting butterfly wings. And she was collecting them. She would ask the butterflies for their wings, and they would give them to her. And she was getting them from all different kinds of butterflies, not all the same butterfly, right? Opinion to belief. And then she used those butterfly wings to construct her own wings. And I remember when I read that, that's kind of how I felt about my journey, because I'm dipping, like I'm picking berries, like I'm asking butterflies for their wings. I'm finding truth and gold and gems everywhere. And with that, I can construct my own wings.
Right. And sharing stories of your own peripatetic path that you've been walking along the way as you meet other hermits who are along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's glorious. I love it.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I definitely want to touch on, I really want to get to what he says about the heart.
The chakras.
Yeah. That's because the idea that what this is about is the transformation of the whole person into heart. Anyone have any particular part of that they'd like to share?
Well, I just love what he did with the sayings from the Gospel of St. John.
Yeah, the I am sayings.
Dang. Yeah.
You want to share that, Michael?
That's the best.
Well, people don't know because it's an interesting that he kind of grafts that onto the Vedic chakra system.
Yeah.
Right. Which, and I think there is certainly something to that system. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. I'm not a expert at it, but what I used to read a lot about it way back in the day. But so he starts with the I am the resurrection and the life as corresponding to the 8-petaled lotus. I am the light of the world, which is at the top. I am the light of the world, the 2-petaled lotus. I am the good shepherd, the 16-petaled lotus. I am the bread of life, the 12-petaled lotus. I am the door, the 10-petaled lotus. I am the way, the truth, and the life, the 6-petaled lotus. And I am the true vine, the 4-petaled lotus. So, and those different lotus systems, like the lower chakra is at the sacral point, right? So it's what grounds you. Then there's the sexual one, and then there's the solar plexus, then the heart, then the throat, then the third eye, and then the crown, right? And back in the day, that's why I'd meet people who were into that stuff, and they thought it was like a contest to get to enlightenment first. You ever meet these people? I'm gonna hurry up and get it. Yeah. I'm gonna be enlightened as hell, man. Check it out, right? And you're like, okay, I'm done.
Oh, hopelessly Western.
Okay, I'm gonna be a hermit because I can't do with this. I cannot do this. But because you know what I mean? Because it's become such an ego trip for a lot of people. And this is what Tomberg is doing here, I think, is he is showing what he said in the beginning. It's kind of his method, showing how the logos, I wouldn't say neutralizes, but transcends that, brings those things to their fruition.
Yes.
Makes all those things new.
Yeah.
he illustrates right below where you read. He illustrates the difference between the method. He says, here is the difference in the choice of method. It is a matter, dear unknown friend, of choosing between the method of vibrating particular syllabic sounds, ham, yam, ram, lam, vam, and lam, and the method which is in view of spiritual communion with the 7 rays of the I am, or the 7 aspects of the perfect self, who is Jesus Christ. The first method aims at awakening the centers such as they are. The second aims at the Christianization of all the centers, i.e., their transformation in conformity with their divine human prototypes. It is a matter here of the realization of the words of the Apostle Paul. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
And then just one more little bit right below that, he says, the work of Christianization of the human organization, i.e., the transformation of the human being into a man of heart, is accomplished in the inner life of man, the lotus flowers being only the field where the effects of this purely inner work are manifested. Now the domain where this transformation is immediately effected consists of 3 pairs of contraries, practical antinomies, and the 3 neutralizations of binaries, 9 factors. Which is why I think that the Hermit is the 9th arcanum.
Yeah, because it's those 3 and
Yep.
whatever they are.
The 3 pairs of binaries
things,
and then
yeah.
their resolution, which makes a set of 9,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is about the transformation of becoming the man of heart who's following the master.
I like that. I just want to read this last. You just stopped short of the end of the chapter, so I'm going to finish it because it's so
Okay.
good. When we speak of the practical antinomy, knowledge, will, and its solution, the heart, this is only a general view of the task of integration of the human being. In practice, we have to do with will and the heart of knowledge, knowledge and the will of the heart, and knowledge and the heart of the will. For there is feeling and will in the domain of thought, thought and will in the domain of feeling, and thought and feeling in the domain of the will. There are therefore 3 triangles of knowledge, heart, will in practicing the inner work of integrating the human being. Now, the distinctly practical teaching of the 9th arcanum is that it is necessary to subordinate the directing intellectual initiative, as well as the flowing spontaneous movement of thought, to the heart of thought, i.e., to the profound feeling that is found at the basis of the thinking that one sometimes designates intellectual intuition, and which is the feeling for truth. It is also necessary to subordinate both spontaneous imagination and actively directed imagination to the direction of the heart, i.e., to the profound feeling of moral warmth that one sometimes designates moral intuition, and which is the feeling for beauty. Lastly, it is necessary to subordinate spontaneous impulses and designs directed from the will to the profound feeling which accompanies them, that one sometimes designates practical intuition, and which is the feeling for the good. The Hermit of the 9th card is the Christian Hermeticist who represents the inner work of 9, the work of realizing the supremacy of the heart in the human being, in familiar traditional terms, the work of salvation, because the salvation of the soul is the restoration of the reign of the heart.
Amen.
Amen. And I think, we were talking earlier, and you probably get this feeling for truth, or feeling, where, especially you see it when we talked earlier about in rioting groups, or you know what I mean, where there's a kind of collective egregore going on, and you feel it doesn't. No, I can't. No, this is not true.
Yeah.
They're not going to bully me into thinking it's true either, right?
Yeah.
So you either kind of try to avoid them. Rarely do you try to engage them. But I think that is an example of the feeling for truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Just like you have a feeling for beauty. I mean, sometimes you see things and you're like, pornography is a good example, but there's something, that kind of violates your inner being. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's good. That's good.
There's some art that actually is like that. Like, beautiful, right? Like it doesn't have to be like pornography. It could be something that other people think is beautiful, and I'll be standing in front of it going, yeah, no.
Yeah, right on. I'll see myself out. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Gotta go check the meter.
Yeah. I went to so there's this old CIA listening station in Berlin. This is really this is so symbolic. It's built on the only mountain. Berlin is just a plain. It's a flat plain, right? And it's actually quite wet there. And I like to think about these things when I think about where cities are built, But anyway, after the bombing of Berlin, after the Second World War, they took all the rubble and they heaped it up in one place. And it's these two mountains, okay? And on top of them are these CIA listening stations.
God.
Built in the 50s. And they're these huge balls, right? I think only one of them is still intact. And you go in there and the acoustics are amazing, just mind-boggling. You make the tiniest little sound, little pin drop, and it just goes, And so people are in there and they're making, doing music or making little sounds. You can just sit, and listen to them, or you can try your own sounds, and you whisper and everyone can hear it.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That's what the CIA is all about.
That's right. But then it's been taken over by what they call in Europe alternative types, right? Which they just
what the CIA intended for evil.
Yeah. They're actually anarchists, and they live there. They charge you a little fee and you go in, and there's graffiti everywhere, right? And they actually have graffiti competitions in some of the old buildings, and the buildings are all falling apart, but there's this incredible air of secrecy everywhere because the doorways are narrow and they're little long tunnels and it's dark and it's just crazy.
Wow.
But some of the art there, some of the art was, it would just right away I would go, oh, I love that, right? But some of it I would just be like, no. Not that. And it wasn't that it wasn't beautiful, because it's sometimes it was actually beautiful, it would attract your eye.
But it was wrong.
But it was wrong. That's right. That's the word. It was wrong.
Which means it's not real. Which means it's not really beautiful.
Right.
Right. In the proper sense.
No. Yeah. This is kind of like what McDonald talks about, and he gets it from Coleridge, but I've only heard McDonald talk about it. Between fancy and imagination, right? That idea. Yeah.
Barfield talks about that too.
Yeah.
From Coleridge as well. Well, thanks
we made it through this.
Yeah, thanks. This was a really interesting chapter. Thanks for joining me. I not sure when our next one will be because I'm in the process of moving, so might have a little break pause here.
Okay.
But thanks for joining me.
Good to see you.
Yep.
Bye.
And like and subscribe.
Yes, do.
That's right.
Support us on Patreon. I hope you all have a blessed day.
Yeah.